In fact, we kept discussing amongst us in our management committee. One thing we all agreed was that nothing changes, right? The strategy doesn't change. If your strategy is right, whether basically there is a slowdown or no slowdown, it doesn't change to a great extent. You may slightly, tweak few things, prioritize few things just to address some of the challenges, but overall picture remains the same. If that is the case, then we are on the right.
Hello and welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Cariappa. Every week, I speak to founders, operators, and investors on what it takes to build and scale the next unicorn. If you haven't done so already, please follow or subscribe to the Startup Operator and rate and review us on your favorite platform. This week, we have Subbu, who is the co founder and chief operating officer at Blackbuck, on the podcast. Some of you may recall that we had Blackbuck's chief data scientist, Deepak Warrior, on the podcast earlier, where we spoke about some of the data and engineering complexities at Blackbuck. This conversation focuses more on the business aspects. For instance, how does Blackbuck operate in such a fragmented market with very low tech adoption? What goes into building a verticalized marketplace? And what it takes to win in the very complex logistics sector. Blackbuck is an infinitely interesting startup, and there's plenty to learn from them. So let's get started on this episode of the Startup Operator Podcast with Subbu. Hey Subbu, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks, Roshan. Thanks for inviting us. Look forward to our discussions today.
Awesome. Yeah. So we've had Deepak, who's the chief data scientist at Blackbuck, on the podcast earlier,
Right.
and that was a fascinating deep dive into many aspects of Blackbuck. I'm really excited to talk about some of the business nuances on this podcast, right? So maybe to begin things, let's give the audience a lay of the land, right? Could you give us a sense of the landscape in which you operate? Because freight logistics is such a critical thing for the economy. What does it take to distribute products in India? What are some unique characteristics of this market?
Yeah. So, we are dealing with one of the largest industries across the world. It's a pretty large industry in terms of size. If you see, it's a $3 trillion plus industry across the world. And in India itself, it is more than $150 billion industry when you actually look at road transportation, right? And for the size it has, the level of fragmentation that you see, and because of this fragmentation on both sides, the kind of challenges that the industry faces, very importantly, the information asymmetry that is there across the board, that's something surprising for many, but it has been there for a very long time, right? So just to give you certain numbers, India $150 billion. In that, if you really look at long haul transportation, that's closer to $90 billion. When I say long haul, more than 150, 200 kilometers. And if you look at the truck ownership on the supply side, roughly around 3.5 million trucks plying in long haul trucking, and it is owned by closer to 1.5 million truck owners. So if you look at the ownership that way, it is roughly around two trucks per owner, right? So that's the level of fragmentation you see on the supply side. And similarly, demand side, you are aware, right? There are many SMEs and smaller traders and manufacturing units shipping the goods from one end to the other end of the country. So with both side fragmentation, it is quite natural that the chain is a very long chain with multiple intermediaries. And when that happens, definitely, everything happens manually. So information asymmetry is there at every level, and eventually leading to very poor realization for the truckers on one hand, and on the other side, the customers not getting the best cost, and very importantly, the best service that's possible, right? So that is the problem area that we are talking about. It is not just an India problem, it is everywhere, across the world. You would find something very similar. The level of fragmentation might change slightly, but largely the picture doesn't change. And that's something that motivated us to get into the industry, the largeness of the problem and the impact that one could actually create, right? So right from day one for us, it's about finding a solution for the market at large, right? Not just finding or improving efficiencies with a set of trucks, right? That could have been probably easier if we just own our own trucks or have our own trucks and then do whatever we want to do and then try to, make things happen. That would have been probably easier. Of course, asset heaviness in this area, it comes with its own challenges, but in terms of doing things and demonstrating, it would have been much easier. But our goal has always been to do things at large. How do we use the existing capacities to really make a big difference and eventually address those two main objectives that I highlighted? How can we ensure that the truckers earn more, and at the same time there is a lower cost for the shippers and the best possible service that they could get, right? So that's the problem area that we got motivated with, and there is lots of scope to bring in technology to completely remove the information asymmetry that we see. And that's the area that we have been working on in the last 7 years. There have been multiple experiments and so on, but our eventual goal and the road that we are pretty clear about is to create this digital freight marketplace, the largest digital freight marketplace, first in India and later on across the world, to eliminate the efficiencies, bring these shippers and truckers together, and ensure that the benefits, go to both sides. Right? That's the problem area that we have been working on.
Right. Yeah, in many ways, I feel like this space is perfect for technology disruption, right? I mean, as you mentioned, highly fragmented, a lot of information asymmetry. I think asset utilization also is kind of low. Just perfect for technology to come in and bring in efficiencies. But it's also a very difficult market, right? I mean, because fragmentation, again, it has its own set of challenges. The margins are also like quite thin, and it's extremely ops heavy. So as someone who has spent a lot of time in this space, right, how do you get involved in this space, and what are some special insights that you uncovered which led you to starting Blackbuck?
Yeah. So see, as people talk about, mainly the investors talk about the, one is the product market fit, but also the founder market fit is important. And this is one domain where founder market fit, in my view, it is critical, right? It definitely helps
Absolutely.
that three of us come with the logistics background, right? We have been in operation, so we definitely know, at least we covered the base really well. We didn't have to get into some trial and error in larger, the premises or the guidelines that one should follow, right? For example, from day one we were very clear that we will never be asset heavy. I mean, there is enough data across the world when it comes to logistics companies, and then being asset light has proven to be the best model. And it clearly matches with our goal of solving problems at large, right? So these are some of the aspects. So I'm highlighting the founder market fit that is extremely critical in this domain, and us coming with that background has really helped us. But having said that, we have also discovered many things over the last 7 years, and there has been a new learning every now and then. The more we get deeper, we discover something more, right? The other day, Rajesh, my co-founder, was talking about something. I mean, every time he goes for a market visit, he comes, even today, we come with a new learning altogether. So after 7 years, after multiple market visits, and all of us spend at least 5 days in the market every month, whenever we come back, there is a new learning, right? And that has helped us to also change the course, pivot very importantly in certain areas. And yeah, it's a long journey. It is not at all easy. As you correctly said, it's ops heavy, but we are now neck deep. We have to get in and we have to actually solve. So we are determined to get this done.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, like they say, the most difficult problems are reserved for the best of us to solve, right? And indeed, I mean, all of you folks are from that background, right? I mean, I think Rajesh is from ITC as well before this. So yeah, kind of the perfect founding team, the right skill set to solve this mega mammoth problem. Let's give a sense of what Blackbuck is for the audience, right? I mean, people who are listening. People call Blackbuck the Ola for trucking, and I think that's a a very big disservice, in terms of the scope of things that you solve for, right? I mean, it's way more than that. Could you talk to us about what Blackbuck does and some of the use cases that you solve for?
Yeah. So the fancy way of tagging most of the new age trucking companies at that point in time was basically Uberization of trucking and things like that. So I'm not surprised when somebody says Ola or Uber of trucking. But see, when we started with a very clear idea of creating a digital marketplace, digital freight marketplace, and where it is similar to cab hailing services. On one hand, there is a passenger waiting for a cab, and then using the app to book the cab, and the transaction goes through just digitally, and a greater amount of convenience is achieved by the car coming to you, right? So a similar model is what we also started with. There are companies, whether it is small and medium enterprises or larger shippers, needing the trucks, and they would be able to book the trucks as and when they need. That's the kind of concept that most of the trucking new age companies, we all envisaged and we try to create. Now, unlike cab hailing, this is, in my assessment, and we all agree, it's a tougher one to crack because there are multiple things involved, multiple stakeholders, lots of documentation related activities, and the at the end of the day, the goods that are transported, it has its specific requirements and so on, right? You have these complexities, and also, if you really look at it from the customer segments point of view, there are SMEs who might want to take the truck on a spot basis, while the larger shippers would not like to do it on a spot basis, so they go in for contracts, right? So there is a different model in terms of if you actually try to compare this with Uber or Ola. Here, a large 30 to 40% of the market works on contract, so it's a contract marketplace, and then remaining works on spot, which is a spot marketplace, right? So we started with this, and when we started, we also realized that there were two options for us. One is that we become a complete fulfillment company, taking the entire responsibilities and liabilities that come along with this, or we just remain as a discovery platform, right, where we don't take care of the fulfillment. We just allow both parties to discover each other, discover the prices, and facilitate certain processes so that the transaction gets closed on their by themselves directly, right? So these are the two options, but we looked at taking the comparisons of an Amazon or Flipkart. We thought that being a complete fulfillment company would also be a good way to actually capture the market and also capture the entire profit pool that is available. So that's how we started. But when you actually go in that path, you also understand that as a fulfillment company, it's ops heavy. When it is ops heavy, obviously the scalability will have its own challenges, and that's when we realize that our main goal of addressing the market at large, this way we realize that it would take a much longer time to reach and achieve, and therefore we need to do something along with this, do something else that could actually expedite the whole process, right? So that's when we kind of started introducing the other platforms and services, and the goal is to really see how quickly we can acquire the supply side, right? Like in any marketplace, once the supply is there and you find a good way to engage with them, right, your ability to actually do multiple things, and especially that creating a digital marketplace at a later point in time, it becomes easier. And therefore we wanted to see how we can quickly acquire the supply, as many truckers as possible. And we fortunately found some good tools and methods to get there, right? And that's where one important tool that we've been able to make use of, thanks to the Indian government, is e-tolling. The e-tolling mandate came, and then we were well prepared to actually get into that area. And today, if you see, Roshan, one of every, I mean, every three trucks that run in India, one would be a black book truck carrying the FASTag issued and managed by Blackbuck, right? So that brought us a lot many more truckers, much faster than the other side. Had we actually gone and taken only the route of complete fulfillment, it would have taken ages for us to reach there. But this really helped us to expedite the process. Today we have more than 1 million transacting truckers on the platform, thanks to the FASTag initiative. Of course, once that was created, what you're doing is also creating a digital highway, and you are able to introduce any product on top, right? It's any category, any product on top. And that way, we've been able to bring in other services as well, right? Whether it is GPS or fuel or even financial services. But the underlying premise for us is to really digitize the trucking ecosystem. For us to create a larger digital freight marketplace, it's important to digitize every aspect of trucking. When we were trying to come from one side without the rest of the areas not having been digitized, it was not so easy for us to actually do certain things. So we decided to come from the other way and see how we can expedite the digitization process in trucking. Of course, there was a government mandate which we were very happy to ride on, and then do other things to digitize the trucking aspect. So when I say trucking ecosystem, how do I digitize the loads? How do I digitize each and every truck? Right here, it could be FASTag or GPS, but digitizing the truck, which is the unique unit at the end of the day, that's going to be critical. With that, I can get a lot more data, right? And about the location, about the availability, and things like that. How do I digitize payments, and how do I digitize even the overall fleet management or linkages with any of the other ecosystem players, right? All these things, it made a lot more sense for us to actually get into and do first. And once you do that, your ability to engage deeply with the truck owner is clearly established, and then you can start building layers over that, right? Layer by layer, and then eventually you create a tracking digital tracking ecosystem where marketplace, the freight marketplace, is one of the largest aspects. At the same time, we also have, in each and every area, if it is required, we might have been creating a marketplace or a specific way of engaging digitally, right? So that's the whole idea of doing this. And it has been, I would say, from 2017 mid onwards, this initiative of ours, it has really paid off well for Blackbuck. So from a fulfillment company to today a digital trucking ecosystem company, we believe we've come a long way. We have created lot many products along the way that touch each and every stakeholder in the trucking ecosystem, very importantly the trucker. And we've been able to engage deeply with them without just talking about only loads, right? Initial idea was only loads, and that's the only way to engage the trucker. But if you really see today, we have multiple other ways to engage deeply with the trucker, whether it is payments, fleet management, or is need for short-term financing or vehicle financing. There are multiple things that we've been able to get through and engage with the truckers.
Right. Yeah, so it's super interesting. I mean, you're layering a marketplace with a technology solution and also with services, right? I mean, perhaps financing and so on and so forth as well. So this matching of demand and supply, right? I mean, I understand it's pretty difficult for let's say cabs and whatnot in Bangalore, but it's also manifoldly difficult for you, right? When you think about trucking as such, because extremely fragmented, and then the demand supply dynamics are very, very different. Can you give us a sense of how do you match these folks, and how do you optimize for uptime and economic utilization and so on? I understand this could be like the subject of a dissertation paper or something of that sort, with a bunch of operation research guys writing down all of the nerdy things, but
You should have asked
for
this question with Deepak. I'm sure you
Deepak,
did. And yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, but for the audience, which is a layperson just listening to the nuances of this, right? Can you give us a 101 of what happens?
Right. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's a difficult problem to crack, right? So, let's say that there is a truck carrying certain goods from north traveling towards Mundra port. Typically, what happens is the truck comes to Mundra port, drops either at a CFS or goes into the port to drop the goods. Then it comes back, and the driver and the truck owner will have to basically, it could be two different people, right? So the driver and the truck owner, they'll have to interact or get in touch with multiple intermediaries to find a return load back to north. Now, in the process, I'm talking about an average number across the board. A truck might wait for, in India, it actually waits for more than 1.5 days to get the right return load. It's an average. Some trucks would find in 8 hours, some trucks would find in 24 hours, some trucks would wait for even 2 days plus. And truck is a very expensive asset, and this asset idling for more than 10 hours, it's a waste. How do we ensure that we actually get the right information before the truck reaches Mundra and gets the relevant load in place and show it to the truck owner, so that the truck owner can take a call before the current load reaches the destination and it gets unloaded? Before that, he can make a call, and the truck actually is ready with the return load within 6 hours or 4 hours of time. That is the goal with which we actually try to do this matching problem. And one important thing in our case is that our focus right from the beginning, from day one, it has been on small truck owners, right? And owners having less than one or two trucks, right? So then in that case, what happens is, for them to appreciate all these things, to really use an app and improve on the utilization, that also needs lot more education, right? And it is not like, unlike an Ola Uber case where you can digitally acquire a customer, here it is not like that. For us to go physically, meet them, acquire them, educate them, right, and persuade them to actually start using digital means to do the transactions, including this, right? So once they are on board, and it is basically, and also digitizing each and every truck with a FASTag or a GPS, that gives us the information about where the truck is, when it is going to reach the destination, how long does it take at the destination for the truck to turn around, and where, typically, what are the preferences of the driver who's driving the truck, to immediately take the load, or he will wait and take rest and then he will come back. Use all these information to then decide what are the relevant loads that the truck owner should see. The catch is to show the most relevant loads, right? And if you really see, the way our product team works is that, since it's a small fleet owner, everything comes on the app, and in one screen he should be able to see, and in the first screen that he see with the loads, he should be able to select, and the option should get sorted and closed, right? That is the goal, rather than him going through, scrolling down and going through multiple loads, making multiple calls, and then deciding, how do I actually use the information and show the most relevant loads to him in such a way that he's able to select in the first one or two. So that we use multiple information, right from the location data to the driver specific information, through to the destination warehouse or port specific information in terms of turnaround and product requirements, truck related data points, to use all these things and see that, okay, this is the right match, and therefore I will show these relevant loads. And then, based on how the truck owner is selecting the loads, even after showing relevant loads, how he is selecting, use that information, to further digest and come up with better and better relevance in the next time, right? So that's how it gets done. I've used simple words because I can't actually use technical words anyway.
No, that's a fascinating explanation. Really, I mean, the complexity of it all just like boggles my mind. I think the number of things that you have to account for. So something that you brought up is, I think critical, right? Which is that you're operating in a very tech deficient environment, especially when you look at fleet owners or truckers and so on, right? I mean, these folks are, may have just been introduced to smartphones, may not know much beyond WhatsApp, etc. Right? I mean, when you work with these folks, how do you pioneer adoption with these folks? What are some things that have worked for you?
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. When we came in, if I remember the numbers correctly, only 35% of the truck owners had smartphones, and only less than 10% of the drivers had smartphones. Now that is no longer an issue. 100% we see smartphones with the truck owners, and good number of drivers, almost 70% plus, they have smartphones. So the smartphone penetration is the base for everything. Geo might have accelerated it. There are multiple things that have, gone well for us. That's the base. If someone has a smartphone, it doesn't mean that he is ready to do the digital transaction, especially in our area. Because if you really see in our business, the first time users, it's very limited. The truck owners have been there for quite a long period, right? And they've been working with their own linkages. It is relationship based, and they do not readily agree to, unnecessarily rock the boat. And that needs persuasion. Therefore, you need to actually go sit with them, explain to them the benefits, and then over a period of time convert. And I'll just give you a very simple example as how it happens, right? Though tolling mandate happened in the initial period, it happened in multiple, I would say, periods. Finally, government said beyond this, nothing doing, right? But before that, it was happening in bits and pieces. So it was not everyone was immediately moving to tolling, and for them, unlike any other use case, in this case, what's happening is that they have to recharge, and then the toll, when the truck passes through the toll station, it gets swiped, right? So he is putting in the money first. When he is putting in the money, he needs to have the trust. So when we go and say that you use our app and you would be able to recharge, put in 500 rupees, your truck will easily pass through the toll station, or put in 20,000 rupees, the truck driver at a different destination would be able to fuel without having to use cash. For him to believe that, he has to first put in money and he has to see that. So how it happens is our salesperson goes there and tells him, explains everything, and he says, okay, you first put in your money in my account and let me see whether it gets recharged, right? So our salesperson might even put in 100 rupees and show that, see, it actually works. And then he will ask his truck driver to, swipe across a toll station or swipe at a petrol pump to see that it actually happens, right? And then he will put in his money, and till the time it gets used, he will not allow my salesperson to leave the scene. Now, I might be slightly exaggerating here, but they need to create the trust. It's pretty critical because it's his money and it's hard earned money, and they are always hand to mouth, and they don't want anything else to happen in this area, right? So therefore, one important thing for us in payments, unlike other categories, use cases like you and I using the digital payments, here the success rate has to be even much higher. It's hand to mouth situation. He is transferring the money cannot get caught in between, right? That's a very clear goal for us to have the best success rate, even compared to consumer cases, right? So trust is one area that we have been really working on, and that's created through physically being available, persuading and educating, number one. Number two is that really all these payments and any transaction that he does, he's, the success rates are really, really high. Third, any problems that he encounters, whether it is digitally or through our, physical infrastructure, we are able to sort it out within the shortest possible time, right? Now, you do, and there are much more. We have to ensure that there is no fraudulent case. Every aspect goes through reasonably well. For most of our truck owners, it might be a secondary business. He might be actually having a sweet shop or doing farming, and this becomes a secondary business. In that case, he doesn't want to have any problem. His current business is going okay, and he doesn't want to rock the boat unnecessarily. And for us to actually break that linkage, we have to create trust. We have to make it work all the time, consistently deliver, right? So that has been the major challenge, and that's the area where we have invested quite a bit. And as we speak, we have closer to 10,000 plus touch points on the ground, right, to create this level of engagement, initial engagement. Ours is a product business. Once they are in forever, right? Given the fact that this the profile of a customer, they are not tech savvy, and they do not want to change very often. So when they are in, they are in. But you have to get them in, and to get them on board, it is lots of efforts, and we have invested heavily, on getting this done.
Yeah. No, I think it's very, very interesting because, people generally think that, hey, if I have a vernacular version of the app and I have like 5 or 6 languages, I mean, that will suffice. But really building trust and confidence through all of those ways that you mentioned, right? Even demonstrating how this works, is critical. When you're trying to streamline a very fragmented market, like the kinds that you're talking about, right, or that you're operating in, there are a lot of vagaries that you're subject to, right? I mean, because I mean, if you look at trucking itself, I think the movies do a very, I don't know, good or bad job of showing this trucking, right? Whether it is Pushpa or Vikram Veda or whatever. I mean, they talk about trucking having so much of corruption, so much of inefficiency, so much of violence, and so all sorts of things, right, associated with that. When you try to bring some sense of professionalism in this kind of an environment, right, what are some do's and don'ts for people who are listening to this, who may be executing in a different market with similar characteristics? What would you say they should do and not do?
Yeah. No, see, the challenge has been there in every area, and in trucking, of course, the interventions along the, during transit and so on, it used to be very high. But as a country, we've been improving on multiple fronts, and in trucking also, we have seen lots of improvements in the last 7 years. Whether it is GST implementation or really check post removals at multiple places, and clear mandate from the government in terms of lesser and lesser intervention during transit. All these things have helped. Having said that, of course, certain problems still continue. Like in any other industry, it continues. But see, for us, the most important thing is, the moment you make it digital, the moment you make it transparent, and that's exactly what the government has been doing, whether it is GST or e-way bills and things like that, it automatically, sorts some of these basic problems. And right from day one, we've been focusing on digitizing. For example, when we started, it was still cash payments. When you fulfill a shipment to the truckers, mostly it was being done in cash. And within the first 2 months itself, we were closer to 95% plus digital payments, automated digital payments, right? So that is kind of eliminated lots of other basic challenges that you would have encountered otherwise, right? So I would say that going digital and making it as transparent as possible, it eliminates most of these basic challenges. And of course, with government mandate and policies helping you, it only gets better.
Right. So let's continue on that thread, right? I mean, I would love to get your thoughts on the national logistics policy, right, that the government has announced. India has, most of us know the logistics cost is huge, right? It's around 13-14%. And I think the government has been trying various initiatives, the Gati Shakti, even, e-tolling, as you mentioned, FASTag, all of those things, right? They've now launched a unified logistics interface platform as well. Can you Can you talk about some of these government initiatives, how it's going to impact the industry as such?
Yeah, sure. See, I'll just come to national logistics policy a little later, but if you really see our journey, and in the last 7 years, we have seen some important interventions by government in the trucking area, right? And in when we started, within a year plus, we had demonetization coming in, and that was a big impact area in terms of truckers being now ready to consider digital payments for fuel, right? Toll was not there at that point in time, but fuel, which was largely in cash, that most of the truckers started really thinking how it can be addressed, and therefore moving into that digital mode of payments, right? It started from there. So that was one very important policy intervention. Then GST came, and GST and subsequent removals of all checkposts and state boundaries, it helped the trucking ecosystem to a great extent, right? Right from unnecessary waiting period at toll gates and the checkpost areas and so on, to even in the state having to deal with multiple documentation when you move from one state to another state. All these things got addressed to a great extent. Along with that, the e-way bill creation, and therefore ability to verify each and every transaction, right? It is legally see whether it is a legitimate transaction or not. That became much easier, and later on, I'm sure this is going to really be used in financing, whether it's basically on the bill discounting side or whatever that is required, the tracking ecosystem needs. This is a very important legitimate document that can be used to have multiple use cases. Then the government also did axle load modification, improving the increasing the load is by 25%, right? And that kind of removed the overloading aspect to a great extent, right? It was already improving, but with this, it put an end to the overloading aspect. Of course, it increased the supply for the demand that was there. It had an impact on cost and so on. But overall, as a policy, all these things were taking the trucking ecosystem forward, right? Then even Gati Shakti, which came much earlier before NLP, is fast tracking all the approvals, right, through an unified window. That was really helping. Otherwise, if I have to put a logistics park, I have to go to environmental ministry, go to the other multiple, at least 15 plus ministries to get the permissions and the licenses, and then really do things. That has been simplified to a great extent. And if you talk to the industry players today, they really see an improvement in this area, right? Having implemented this, the impact is already seen. Now, with all these things, now comes the NLP. And in my view, how I see it is that it's a very clear demonstration of intent. Number one, that for us to be a global manufacturing unit, it's important to get the logistics sorted in the country, right? And it is very significant. Without that, achieving that goal is not going to be easy. And here we are to make things streamlined and easier for all industry players, right? That's the government's strong message. And that's a clear thing for me, to start with, number one. Number two, whether it is the goal of cost reduction or digitizing and unifying, all the all the different industries and platforms, it's a great way of actually moving forward. But it'll also take lots of time. It's not, there are multiple platforms, multiple different systems. They've already IP, it is already in place. It'll take some more time to get kind of streamlined and remove all the initial challenges that we face. It'll take some more time, but as it has happened in other policy interventions, we are very sure that this would also get stabilized to a great extent, right? And when this mandate comes and clear signaling comes from the top, and also all these policy interventions, it's an inducement, and it is for the market players to use it in the right way to actually make the best use of it. And that's how we see it. It's not necessary for the policy to address each and every nitty gritties, but larger landscape has been put in place, and there would be further improvements coming in, whether it is unified platforms or other specific interventions. But overall, now it is much easier for the industry player to address some of these aspects, right? I've been seeing various posts, someone really asking for a very specific efficiency improvement that the government should have addressed, and things like that. In my view, a policy will have to be at a very macro level, make things clearer and show the direction, and then it's up to the market players to really keep doing certain things and make the best use of it. And from that perspective, I see NLP is a welcome change. It's a good way of actually signaling clearly to the industry players. And I'm sure in the months to come, things will become much clearer, and it's going to be very useful for all of us.
Right. Yeah, I think intent is the starting step, right? I mean, to solving any of these things, and the fact that these digital platforms also, you mentioned ULIP, right? Even the ease of logistics services or e-logs that they have launched as well, right? For any kind of issues and so on relating to performance or operations with the government, they can kind of it's one platform for them to source any complaints and issues, right? All of these things I think will definitely take some time, but it's certainly directionally right, I would say, right?
If the e-way bills are there stored in one platform, and that data is available for the financing agencies to access and really verify certain things, and then extend financing support to trucking companies, that's a great use case, right? If it is basically available in one single platform, or the tolling data being used to track vehicles, that's another great use case that we all look forward to. So like that, there are multiple things that can emerge out of this, and it needs a little bit time for stabilization, but I'm very certain that it would actually take us in the right path.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's certainly an exciting time to be in this space. But it seems like you already have. I mean, you already have your hands full with everything that you are doing at this point of time. But could you give us a glimpse of what is coming up at Blackbuck over the next 12 to 18 months?
So I think heads down and execute really well. At the end of the day, that is the biggest challenge that we have right today. By digitizing the trucking ecosystem, we have made our business much more product led and technology led. But still, for us to actually get many of these things done, we need a laser sharp focus on execution, with multiple people on ground and getting these things done. That's going to be our clear focus. The roadmap is ready for us, digitizing the trucking ecosystem, and really, whether it is loads, as I mentioned, loads, payments, trucks, and the other processes and stakeholders associated, that journey is clearly on, right? And we might keep introducing certain categories to engage deeper with the trucker, layer by layer, based on the priorities that we have already drawn out. But the core is to really, digitize the trucking ecosystem as early as possible, and on top of it, really create multiple use cases, including the digital freight marketplace for India. That's the goal. I'm not sure whether 12 to 18 months would be good enough for us to do that. It's going to be a marathon. It might take longer time, but we are pretty excited. We know it is a tough problem, but we also know that that's why it hasn't been cracked all these years, and that's why it'll get cracked this now, when we just focus and get things done.
Right. Another couple of questions before I let you go. You're seeing a slowdown, right, in the market, obviously with everything that's happening, inflation in the US, and then the Fed hiking rates and whatnot, and
there's clearly a funding crunch as well, right? I mean, as they say, it's a funding winter and so on. With all of this, doom and gloom, it's easy for founders to be distracted. So, in these circumstances, in these situations, what is your advice in terms of keeping the eye on the ball and making sure that they execute in such a way that they meet their goals?
Right. No, see, in fact, we kept discussing amongst us in our management committee. One thing we all agreed was that nothing changes, right? The strategy doesn't change. If your strategy is right, whether basically there is a slowdown or no slowdown, it doesn't change to a great extent. You may slightly, tweak few things, prioritize few things just to address some of the challenges, but overall picture remains the same. If that is the case, then we are on the right path, right? I'll just give you an example. If a company is pursuing aggressive growth by really throwing money, and then the slowdown comes, and therefore I need to change path, and at that point in time, strategy and everything else can change, right? But if we are doing things in the right way, frugally, with financial prudence, and in by addressing the right things, whether it is slowdown or normal times, it doesn't change. So that's the first point I would like to say. The strategy has to be clear, and strategy will have to be, in the we'll have to pursue it in the right way. Then these shocks would not really disturb to a great extent. Secondly, taking from there, even if you look at it from cost management perspective or teams and so on, when you actually do the business in the right way, for example, just to give you an idea, if you can variabilize certain costs when you're creating certain teams, doing it from day one makes sense. You might try to do with a small team to understand few things, but variabilizing it from day one might help. Now, when the slowdown happens, it automatically help. It helps. You don't have to do anything extra, right? Because you have already variabilized. So wherever there are chances of variabilization, even before a slowdown, even in normal circumstances, one should do. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to highlight is that do the business in the right way, right? Have the right strategies to scale, right strategies to build a sustainable organization. Uh, then it doesn't really make a big difference. And all you need to do is some tweaking here and there. And fortunately, we are one such company where we didn't have to during COVID as well. And even at this point in time, we don't have to do too many tweaks, right? And it's with very simple prioritization aspects you are able to actually move forward, and that's what I would highlight.
Right. Yeah, I really agree with you because I think a lot of times these externalities are grossly exaggerated, right? How much it can impact your business and so on, right? That at least, I mean, my experience, having been through 2008 and 2020, of course, what happened and so on, right? I mean, is that ultimately, I mean, you have to focus on your strategy and execution, right? And really back yourself to do the things that you've always been doing, right? It's a time to go back to fundamentals and run it with conventional business wisdom, basically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, so Subbu, this has been a fascinating chat. I've learned many different things about Blackbuck and the space in which you operate. Right before we end things, any books or podcasts that you would recommend to our audience?
Movies, I would have said very quickly,
Oh,
but
movies as well.
no, just jokes apart. I think every founders podcast, I have always found it pretty useful. I like listening to some of them, especially Naveen from InMobi, and many such podcasts. I would say just as much as possible listen to the founders' stories. There is a learning in every story. That's something I would say. Books, for example, though I read very little. I'm not a good reader. The one that I really liked was Shoe Dog by Nike's founder. It's a great reading. It's a great learning, you know, uh, thing that you could actually do. So I would recommend, very strongly recommend every founder to read that book if possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making time, Subbu, and all the best for everything that you have coming up at Blackbuck.
Okay, thanks a lot, Roshan. Enjoyed interacting with you. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, consider subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform. Also get updates delivered straight to your WhatsApp inbox by clicking on the link in the description.